Hi there. Sorry to keep you folks waiting. I was told to call in at 7:10 that you had some brief business meeting. Can you hear me? I'm not hearing anyone.
She needs to unmute them.
Mute. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. Good evening, everyone. You're all together and I'm just on a screen, but we're all together in our mission, I think. Would you like me to just jump right in?
Yes, if that's all right with you, that would be fine.
It is. I'm just, so you know, I'm on the Redistricting Committee with the League of Women Voters of Tennessee. If you have not done so already, I need to be made a co-host or host so I can share my screen with you.
Oh, wow. Okay, so how do I do that?
Okay, so you go down to where it says participants.
Okay, just a sec. Participants, I see, and then I
Yes, and I think you can go by me and just make me a co-host. I think you have the power to just by my name make me the co-host.
No, okay, that's not. No.
Okay.
Just a sec.
Sure.
So how do I do this? When I click on it, it tries to send you a message, but that's not, there's a little thing here. No.
It says, it should say, well, it should say more on the right little button. It says.
Oh,
more.
wait a minute. Let me scoot this over.
And are you Carolyn by any chance?
No, I'm Kat Faber.
Oh, okay. Well, I had two guesses and I guessed wrong. So
It's
sorry.
not a problem at all. But basically, I'm not seeing.
Well, there's also the option of making.
Let's see. Kat, I'll see if I can help. We do lots of work, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I beg your pardon?
It says pin by your name.
Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I can do this. If I click this, can I pick claim host?
That might be, try that.
Enter the host key to claim host role. I don't understand.
Let me try to claim host. I see that.
It didn't. Yeah.
I need a host key to claim host code.
I know the issue is I'm not the host. I didn't send out the link. The host is going to be the person who sent out the link.
Yeah, who's that?
We received the link from Debbie Gold.
Oh.
So do you want, this gets a little difficult.
I could pretend, I'm trying to brainstorm here. I could quickly, my presentation's not a big deal. I could potentially, hold on, something's going on in my kitchen. I'll be right back. You okay, honey?
I could end the meeting, start a new meeting and email her the link. At which point I would at least be the host and able to make somebody else a host.
Is there a place down here where you can do, where it talks about screen share?
She can share her screen, Kat.
I'm not the host. I can't.
Yeah.
No, but she can choose that option.
Sorry about that.
We
had a little things going on here. So I can send you my presentation if you give me an email address.
Hold on just a moment. Please stop talking behind my ear. Okay. What did you mean to say? I beg your pardon.
Well, I perhaps if I sent you the presentation and I could just say, you know, click through it and we could do it that way.
Well, it would be on my computer screen, but most of people would have to come very close to me to see my computer screen.
Are you projecting this onto another screen?
Yeah, I guess I could do that.
Hang on a second, Kat.
Presentation in
might be easier.
in a format I can use.
Marilyn?
I didn't realize, Debbie did not tell me that we were using her link or anything.
Well, what I wonder is, could you send me your email address?
Yeah.
And Carolyn Johnson, could you send me your email address? I think if you put it in the chat.
Before you go there, hang on. Marilyn, at the bottom of your screen, there's an option that says share screen, and you can then show whatever you're showing.
Oh, no, I can only do that if I'm the host.
No, you don't have to be the host. At least for work, I don't have to do that. Just try.
It said, I'm telling you I'm sorry to interrupt. Well, I get a message that says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Crud.
I did that when I first got on.
Dang it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm no help.
Okay, so what we could do is if Carolyn and Marilyn both send me their emails, my email address is Kat Faber.
Yeah, I saw that on the screen.
Hang on. Kat Faber at toast.net. Yeah, that's your sign in. So I got it right there in front of me. Okay.
Okay. So if you email me your email addresses, I can quit this meeting, start a meeting. Actually, could you start a meeting, Marilyn?
Sure. Well, I can. I have the free version, so I have time.
I also have the free version, so we would
Okay.
have to restart 30 minutes in. I'm so sorry about this.
Well, and so I want to make sure that, why don't we have you do it? Just
Okay,
I
I'll
think
do
it
it.
makes more sense. So I'm going to send you in. I will also attach my email address. I mean, my presentation, in case you want to just do that instead.
That way.
Mhm.
Well, that's the other thing. If you want to email me your presentation, but the thing is, I don't know if I have the app or whatever that will play your presentation.
Oh, it's just PowerPoint. It's nothing exotic.
I have, if Keynote can play PowerPoint, I might be able to find Keynote on my computer. I do not have PowerPoint on my computer.
But yeah, normally I think you could, well, I haven't run into that problem before because anyway. Sorry, we're delaying everybody. Isn't technology fun?
I kind of got roped into this at the last minute and I didn't realize that you were going to be doing this or that.
Well, I'm sorry that I
disabled
just made
function.
some assumptions because I've done a few of these now and it's usually say, hey, so
Okay,
there's always exceptions and I didn't even think about it. So
I understand. Okay, so I guess.
I'm still getting this to you. I just want to make sure, because I had it on my desktop and I'm taking care of this. Just give me another couple of seconds.
And see if I can, okay, I don't need that anymore. Go back to the inbox. Okay. Go back to the inbox and wait for these things to arrive.
I do have access to my son's subscription that won't close up at 40 minutes if you want me to log in, but I
Can
don't
you-
want to complicate
Okay,
it.
I can tell you in general, the presentation itself only takes about half an hour. And so, and often there's a few questions, but we don't end up so far. I mean, you could be the exception in this too. You could have a gazillion questions, but it shouldn't really go beyond 45 minutes normally is what I've experienced. I've done probably about 5 of these.
I understand. I'm just waiting for the email to come in.
Yeah, I sent it. And
I believe you, but I haven't received it yet.
I'm also going to send one without presentation, just in case that goes faster.
Okay. That's fine. Do you mind typing your email into the chat?
Absolutely. Let me do that.
And then I could possibly just get it off that way.
Of course.
It will let me guess. It looks like it will. Okay, thank you.
So while you're working on that, I'm going to share with you that Blount County, where I lived, approved their maps last night at a commission meeting. So
okay,
they're done. The across the state, counties are doing all kinds of different things and all kinds of different timelines. So it's been interesting. Here, they went through a really good process. They made sure they didn't gerrymander and they didn't dilute minorities, but at the end of the day, they came up with something very close to what we already have. But they went through a process where they really looked at things, and I appreciated that.
that does sound good.
There's another county, which I I won't mention which one it was. One county had started their process in June, and this other county hadn't even started a month ago. So I was like, you got a lot of work to do. Because I looked at, and you'll see this, I have a chart that shows the variation within the various districts within your county. And you have to be within a 10% range. And this one county was really crazy different district to district. So they had a lot of work that they needed to do just to get the population equalized. So see, I'm just vamping for time, trying to entertain you with redistricting.
I think, oh, wait a minute. The issue with showing, it will show on my screen. Excellent.
Yay!
Okay.
Excellent.
Yay.
I'm not going to necessarily know where you are, but we can work that out. Okay.
We are on slide 1.
Okay, hang on. I'm going to put myself into slideshow mode here so I can. This will be a little awkward because I'm going to be not being able to see you so much, but that's okay. And I'll just say next slide if that's all right with you.
That is just fine.
All right. So we're here to talk not only about again, greetings everyone. Rocky start, but that's okay. We're all here together because we all care about redistricting and making sure people are represented in their districts. You're probably familiar with League of Women Voters has this, I'll call it a campaign, people powered fair maps. And why do we do that? Well, it's a fair representation of all people. That's what we aim for in redistricting. It looks for public input in the process and transparency in government. So that's what people-powered maps are about. What's at stake in redistricting? A lot of people, not us, of course, but in the general population, it's a really kind of boring topic, and they go, well, who cares? Who cares? I vote one district versus another. But really, when you think about it, there's a lot of money at stake, $500 billion in federal money. It also really is the way that representatives are selected in everything from who goes to Congress to who's on your county commission, as well as school boards, et cetera. And fundamentally, it underlines the sanctity of the principle of one person, one vote. But as we know, the process, I'm sorry, I'm just going along here. Please, I'm on slide, I'll do better next time. I'm on slide that says, but the process isn't always fair. It's slide 4.
Okay, 4.
There we go. I've been narrowly going along. I apologize. Okay, but the process isn't fair. Moving on to slide 5. You may be familiar with the term gerrymandering. Well, this actually came from a politician in 1812 named Eldridge Mander. And what happened is, you can see they took the districts and they created this sort of salamander type object, Eldridge Jerry. I'm sorry, I got his name mixed up. And they said it looked like a salamander, and ever since then, it's been called gerrymandering, where people artificially move voters into one district another so that they can have something favorable for themselves or for the causes that they care about. The reason this looks so bizarre is that these are counties or places that are not necessarily right next to each other. And it's often done, as we know, to favor one political party over another, but it also minimizes the influence of minority communities and fundamentally provides unfair advantage to incumbents. They make sure they have my voters instead of being representative. They feel like they own their voters. I heard a tiny bit of that last night at my local commission meeting. Not very much, but a tiny, tiny bit. Next slide, please.
Okay.
So this just provides some more example of what gerrymandered districts look like. You can tell from just looking at them, something has been done to move all these various places to make up one district when they're not geographically cohesive. So that's one of the fundamental ways you can tell if it's gerrymandered or not. It just flatly doesn't look right. There's a couple of ways that people do this. Next slide, please. One of them is called packing. So that's where it takes a group of people and just packs them into a narrower space so they're not representative represented as they would be just where they live, but they're sort of artificially packed together to minimize their influence. Next slide, please. And this is called cracking, which is kind of the opposite. It dilutes the voting power by spreading them all over the place. So instead of having a cohesive district, they are spread about many. It has the same effect. It dilutes their influence. So packing and cracking, you might hear those terms, are the two ways, the two techniques used to gerrymander districts. What these strategies, next slide, please. What these strategies really do is maximize the future political influence of the party in charge of drawing redistricting maps. And whenever there's, in a state level, when you have super majorities, like we do in our state, but it also happens in democratically driven states too, they draw the districts to suit themselves, generally speaking. Next slide, please. One might ask, well, why don't laws protect us? Well, there's some recent things that happened. Since 2010, the Supreme Court reinforced both discriminatory and political bases for gerrymandering. The 2013 Voting Rights Act, what they did was they changed the formula that was in place that made certain states, mostly Southern, have to get pre-approval before they did change laws. They did away with that. And what the Supreme Court Justice said, John Roberts said, is it was no longer necessary, that those things didn't apply. The formula wasn't appropriate anymore. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't discriminatory practices, but the actual formula they changed. So it's a bit of a technicality, but that's one of the reasons we see so many voting laws coming out right now that seem kind of on their face discriminatory. It was very sad that this piece of the Voting Rights Act went away in 2013. The other, in 2019, the Supreme Court said they had no authority except in racial gerrymandering. And if I'm not mistaken, this was a North Carolina case which had to do with Republicans versus Democrats, a political case of gerrymandering. The Supreme Court said there was no law that let them interfere with that. So again, that's another sad statement coming from the Supreme Court that helps gerrymandering stay alive and well with us. Next slide, please. Another thing to know about is what are the protections for vote dilution? This is a kind of an old case from 1986. It helped establish criteria to prove vote dilution. Basically, the minority group must be able to demonstrate that it is sufficiently large and geographically compact. Remember how we were talking about cracking and packing? So if they're compact, if they're not cracked, they can constitute a majority in a single member district. They also must be able to show that they're politically cohesive. So not only must they be a minority group, but that they have shared political points of view. And they also must demonstrate that the white majority votes sufficiently as a bloc to enable it to usually defeat the minority's preferred candidate. There's a lot to hurdles there, but it still serves as, because there are hurdles, it kind of serves as protection, because it means that people go, well, we've proven all these things, so please make sure there's no minority dilution. And that's a term you hear, and I even hear it in my local county commission. They were very concerned about not diluting the minority vote.
Okay.
So, as you know, there are a couple of, next slide, please. There are a couple of things that are, a couple of acts that have been in front of Congress for a long time this year and even last year. The For the People Act, in narrow version, was in the Senate in September. You know, the filibuster, this is regularly in the news, and we still haven't got through these. I do, and as well as the John Lewis Voting Act, which goes to some of the pre-clearance we were just talking about in the Supreme Court decision in 2013. This tries to rectify some of this and making not about geography, not about the South, but more about the general practices. Both of these are good laws, and we're not necessarily optimistic that they'll pass, but we're still hopeful. The bottom item here, I just updated it yesterday or Saturday or within the past week. There's currently 33 voting restrictive laws passed in 19 states. That number was updated from 30 just a couple of days ago. So there's a lot of bad laws going on in this country trying to restrict people's votes. Next slide, please. Oh, by the way, do write down your questions because I'd like to take them at the end rather than, I didn't say that at the beginning because we were involved in our technology questions, but do write down any questions you have so we can talk about them later. Okay, redistricting in Tennessee specifically. Next slide, please. There are basically three aspects to redistricting in Tennessee: that boundary lines change to reflect population changes. I think that's a bit of a, well, duh. Yes, that's what redistricting is. The population changes, the census tells us so, and we need to realign so we have relatively equal votes by district. It tries to have one person, one vote, the sanctity of that. And just so you know, in Tennessee, each congressional district has an increase of 62,750. I want to also share now, it'll come up again later, but there are different ranges in which the equal populations can be perceived, because it's clearly difficult to get an absolute equal number in all these situations with districts. It's just really a hard job. It's tighter the bigger you go. So congressional districts have it, I think they have 5%, and county districts have a 10% range. So say a deviation, one county now has -2% versus others, another one might have +8. That is a range of 10%, that's okay. So they try to get an overall range that's acceptable, and then they would consider it's equal enough. Next slide, please. As we know, the census did not change the number of representatives that we have here: 9 US House seats, 99 state House seats, and 33 state Senate seats. By the way, the governor can veto the redistricting maps that the legislature creates. Little fun factoid: fewer than 20, this is the little thing at the bottom, fewer than 20% of states have some form of independent commission involved in redistricting. Most states have their legislature handle redistricting, and that's certainly the case here in Tennessee. Next slide, please. Just to give you a quick map to show you, it's a bit of an eye chart, that there's our Tennessee congressional districts. Next slide shows you our Tennessee state Senate and House districts, all 99 of them plus 33. There's a lot of districts. Next slide, please. So this chart shows you the kind of changes that occurred in the 2020 census. And just a quick word about the 2020 census. We know it was delayed by COVID. It didn't come out till April, which put a lot of pressure on all the map creators and legislatures across the country. But also it's really interesting because it was done, I'll call it, there was a dipstick of a census done in April 2020. That doesn't mean there was a lot of work done before then, but that's really when the census numbers were started to accrue. So a lot of the movement that we saw from COVID, where people were moving out of cities into suburbs and moving in, there was a lot of movement that may not have been captured in the census. Just a little interesting sidebar. So what this chart tells us is in Tennessee, you can see that along with your neighbors down north, Sevier and Blount, we're in a light gray area. So there's certainly more than average population change, but not as dramatic as Middle Tennessee, which has seen the most, and not the kind of departure of population like you see down in the southwest corner, which is Memphis. So that just kind of gives you an idea of the kind of populations that have happened across the state of Tennessee. Next slide, please. Here's, I think I mentioned that chart I was going to show you. That should say Jefferson County, by the way. Oops, because these are your numbers. This is Jefferson County variation by your district. So as I mentioned, there should be a total range of 10. Right now, it is not. You've got a -0.6 all the way to, a -11.6 all the way to an 8.5. I think that's the range. So there's some work to do by your district to get that corrected. So next slide, please. In addition to what we looked at for Tennessee, there are federal guidelines that Tennessee has to go by. Districts must be compact and contiguous. This is really interesting when we think about those gerrymandered maps, right? Because they're contiguous. You could sort of draw a line from, you know, the bottom to the top, going through all these places, but they're not necessarily compact. A lot of those districts really fail what they call the eye test. Close to equal population among districts, we just talked about the different ranges that there are. And finally, the Voting Act of 1965, despite the 2013 change of removal of the formula for pre-clearance, minority communities cannot be intentionally diluted by dividing minority populations in different districts. So there is some protection there, even though it's been weakened since it was enacted in 1965. Next slide, please. Our state guidelines. Well, we can have no more than 30 of our 95 counties can be split. If possible, the House district should nest within the Senate district. That's sometimes hard to do, but it's a goal. We try to keep cities and counties together if possible. And as I keep mentioning, pass the eyeball test. Don't look like it's gerrymandered. Next slide, please. We talked about preserving minority strength mandated by law. It's important as we become more diverse, and it's not always obvious that how minorities are clustered. I think it's actually a little harder to achieve because we're less segregated as a country than we used to be. So that kind of makes it in one way a little bit harder. Next slide, please. This shows you again, because it's so important to try to understand how easy it is to gerrymander districts. Here we have, if you look on the left, you've got 60% blue and 40% red. That's really how the population, one person, one vote, fair maps, that's what it would look like. 60% blue, 40% red in this example. But as you can see in the other two, they've managed one side blue really takes all, and the other side red achieved one more district than it would have naturally. This is really quite simple to accomplish if people aren't paying attention. And that is the purpose of this slide, just to show how easy it is to achieve. Next slide, please. There, in addition to political continuity and connectedness and racial connectiveness, there's also something to communities of interest. Why should people care about redistricting beyond politics and race? Well, they might share economic, ethnic, cultural interests, geographic interests. They might care about preserving some place where they live, work, pray, play. There's shared resources, be it schools, utilities, and they might be concerned about either the benefits or hazards of environmental issues or jobs. It's a little hard. We've been talking amongst ourselves at the League of Women Voters statewide about how to identify communities of interest. I think it's not hard to imagine a community of interest that you have with others. It's a little harder to put it in context of a geographic district. But I do ask, I like to spend a little bit of time on this issue, because if anyone can think of a community of interest that you'd either like to preserve or that you think would be benefited if there were a change in the district, this is something that the League of Women Voters of Tennessee would definitely like to hear about, because the racial and political issues always rise to the top, but communities of interest are very important. Hard to identify, very important, and we'd sure like to hear any stories, anybody that has any testimony. Next slide, please. So how does Tennessee do? Most of this section is going to be how we did before, and I'll interject a little bit I know about what's going on now. Next slide, please. Okay, again, this was based upon the last time around. Tennessee was 40th among all states in openness. One of 26 states where transparency not legally or constitutionally required. Now, I will say, unlike last time, there are more meetings giving the public information. That's at the county level. I don't know what they did here 10 years ago, but I sat through every single redistricting committee meeting here in my county. I've attended one House redistricting committee meeting. It was completely open. They haven't published a schedule. We don't know when the other ones are. I've not seen a Senate one yet, but we do feel there's improvement in transparency. So we want to let you know that right away. What did we learn from the last time around? Well, there was really no published criteria how they were going to do the maps. I've not seen a lot. There is a very nice guideline piece put out by the controller on how counties can do redistricting, which is interesting, but there's not really a criteria how they're going to decide the maps. Last time it was rushed. It will certainly be rushed this time. It will certainly feel rushed because the census data arrived late, as we already discussed. Last time they put up some plans, requests for delays were denied. It wasn't a pretty picture, I'm told. I didn't live here at the time, but that's what people say. And most of the alternate plans and most amendments were denied. And finally, there was no meaningful public comments opportunity. Again, that's different this year. At least it started out being different. We're waiting for another meeting. We also want to make sure that there's a meeting once the draft maps are put out, that people can comment on the maps, not just provide input to the maps. I'm not sure I mentioned this later, so I'm going to mention it now. One of the challenges for alternate map creation is that the legislature is asking any alternate maps to be for the full state of Tennessee. That's kind of hard because most of the people interested in this, meaning us, all of us, each of us, is interested in where we live. So it's a little hard to put the entire context of the state, but that's what the state's asking for because that's the job they have to do. So if they have to consider an alternate map, they'd like it to be a complete one. The League of Women Voters of Tennessee has some really simple recommendations. Oh, I'm moved on to the next slide. It says League of Women Voter TN recommendations. Are we together?
We're together.
Beautiful, thank you. So number one, share info about the timeline and opportunities for public participation. We're getting some information, not complete, but there's some. Open meetings, again, we've had one. Now we also suggest posting meetings where maps are drawn and importantly, and we haven't heard they're going to do this, opportunities for public input after the draft maps are created, not just input beforehand. So we're probably, batting 50 so far. We're not in a good enough place with the state, but we're still not deep enough into the process to be overly worried. What's the status? Okay, so I haven't given you specific timelines. The deadline for county maps is January 1st. I just copied and pasted your redistricting committee here. So that's a little bit of hard to read probably, but those are the people who are part of your local redistricting committee. The counties have a tighter timeline than the state. So that's one reason, for instance, our county here in Lunt started in June, and for all intents and purposes, they finished their work last night and they're ready to submit it to the state. So they're a little ahead of schedule. For the state, the deadline is April 7th. The legislature has the committees assigned for redistricting. They're not completely bipartisan, but they do have both Republicans and Democrats, as you can see. So that's the current status of where we are with redistricting in Tennessee and in Jefferson County. I don't know about any meetings. I didn't find one, but I did want to share with you that I did find that you do have, and you probably know more than I do, but you do have committees assigned. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to share this from the Tennessean about where we might be. This is directly from them recently. Any map drawn by the committees will almost certainly maintain or strengthen the Republican majority in Tennessee politics. On the federal levels, lawmakers have not rejected the idea of splitting Nashville's Democratic congressional seat to form a Republican seat. So from a political standpoint, that's what's at stake. That it's specifically Jim Cooper's seat in Nashville is being bandied about and discussed. And that's where they could tip the balance in the United States Congress. It's an opportunity to do that. So that's very much something at stake in the redistricting process. Next slide, please. So how's it going in other places? I just pulled a few headlines that I thought demonstrated different things. So the first one is from Virginia, and the headline is Virginia Redistricting Commission implodes as Republicans reject compromise and Democrats walk out. The sad thing about that headline is this is an independent commission, something we'd all like to see, and it isn't working well in Virginia, maybe because they haven't done it before. But it's sad. I was sad to read this, and maybe it's not surprising. Then we have in Nebraska, the maps were approved. However, if you go into the article, they only had a 2-week process. That probably wasn't a lot of time for people to have much influence, public to have much influence. 2 weeks to me, having sat through several months of what they did here, just in my county, doesn't seem like that's long enough. Then we have in Oregon, blatantly partisan, what Southwest Washington lawmakers say about redistricting. Yes, this is Oregon, but they're talking about Washington. So in this case, just to show you that the League of Women Voters very much is nonpartisan, this is a case where the Democrats were accused of gerrymandering in the state of Washington. We'll probably see more headlines like this come across if you do go Google alerts on these topics. Then we have Texas. Texas approves congressional map that draws no new Black or Hispanic districts, even as people of color fueled population growth. Well, I don't think we'd call that exactly fair or people powered, would we? And that's pretty blatant. And then finally, in Florida, from the Miami Herald, legislators dispute claim that they are intentionally shielding redistricting data. So again, one of the main things we want to see in the process, however it ends up, is it's transparent. I even wrote something in for our local paper, how pleased I was to see our local commission be completely transparent. I attended every single meeting. They went through all their maps. It was completely transparent. And while there weren't dramatic changes, I don't know that we were looking for dramatic changes. There weren't that many changes, but the process was transparent, and that's a good thing, and that's not necessarily happening everywhere. So here we have just an example of an independent commission. Sad to say it's not working, rushed process, gerrymandering, not doing a minority dilution, even though it's against the law. I don't know how they're getting away with it. And finally, where not enough transparency, all the kinds of things that we expect to see, unfortunately, in the redistricting process. Next slide, please. Now we've come to, well, what can you do? Well, get involved. 10 meetings. It's, I think if nothing else, just having, the first time I went to the redistricting committee, one of the commissioners followed me out. He wanted to know who I was. So I tell him I was from the League of Women Voters. He says, "You're just reporting on what we're doing?" I go, "Yes." If they were doing something inappropriate and I didn't think they were doing a good job, I probably would have done that. But I was just really there to track the process and see what they were doing. So committee meetings are happening now. Where it's too much, when we find out about them, we will share you with what's going on in the state level. Those are online, as often is the case with legislative process in Nashville. We can tune in from where we are and just watch the proceedings. Another thing that you may or may not know about is the League of Women Voters, along with NAACP, Civic Tennessee, and some other folks have, we have a coalition, and we have hearings in the grand divisions, West, Middle, and East. The West, I'm showing you the West one because it's happening right away. Actually, it's happening tonight. That's why Debbie wasn't doing that, and I am doing this instead because she's doing that. But I wanted to share with you this flyer because there's going to be a hearing. It's available online for streaming in East Tennessee in Chattanooga on the 19th next week. And this is really an opportunity for people to give testimony. It can be, I think they're going to accept written testimony. The details on how this is going to be live streamed are going to be sent to us later because they use different techniques. It might be YouTube, it might be Facebook. They tried in our first one in Middle Tennessee, we tried it with Zoom. It didn't work very well. So we're just doing streaming. But I do encourage you to participate, just to tune in. It's quite interesting to hear people's testimony. And again, if there's a community of interest story that you have to tell, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for testimony to either improve a district or maintain a district. They're worried about being cracked or packed, as we talked about earlier. So there's a real desire to have testimony provided at these hearings. And again, the one in East Tennessee is coming around just around the corner. Next slide, please. Also, speak out. You can call your legislature, just ask them what they're doing, what's their involvement, and particularly if you know anybody on those districts, excuse me, on the committees. You can find that information out. I'll send you an email later with how to find the committee members. I realize that's not in my presentation and I don't want to go searching for it because I might take too long, but I will send that to you, Kat, so you can share that with others if you're curious about who's on the House and Senate district redistricting committees. So you can certainly write your letter. You can write letters to the editor or an op-ed piece, post on social media. There's any opinions at all are welcome in the area of redistricting, because it's a topic that a lot of people roll their eyes in boredom. But if you really get into it, it's really incredibly important. I know you think it's important because you're attending this meeting, but a lot of other people out there don't necessarily realize what's at stake. And that's why we try to keep things in front of them. So the presentation itself doesn't take long. We've come to the end. You can see who's on our coalition here of working together on redistricting, and the Civic Tennessee specifically, we're helping them, but they're going to be coming up with alternate maps. We're involved with this testimony we just talked about in the hearings. And of course, we're talking to groups and just helping them understand the importance of redistricting. And I'm wondering if anybody has any questions.
Does anybody have a question they want to ask? You need to come up here.
Or relay it to me and I will.
relay it to her.
Or speak very loudly.
Yeah, or scream.
Or scream. Don't throw anything.
Nobody has a question? It was a very good presentation.
Yes, thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much.
Oh, my pleasure. And if you come up with questions or anything, or even ideas of how to identify communities of interest or how to be involved, or any questions afterwards, you have my email address. Please let me know, because again, I'm on the state committee and I have access to, others. So even if I don't know the answer, I can find out.
When you know more about the hearings for East
Oh,
Tennessee,
absolutely. I'm going to let you know.
thank you. I
Absolutely.
would definitely be interested.
Good,
Yes.
good. I think you'll find it interesting. I mean, some people will take the opportunity to talk irrelevantly. I find, people do that. But we did have one fellow, I'll just share one hearing we did have for Middle Tennessee. This fellow described the district went from the north of the state to the south of the state. I was like, well, that certainly sounds gerrymandered. Anyway, I'm obviously passionate about redistricting. So, there's someone with a question.
There's a question.
Oh,
Yay.
You can finish your story.
I'm done.
Okay. I have two questions. One is, could you repeat, only 30 of the counties can be split?
That's correct.
Is that for the US congressional districts?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Is there any rule like that for the state?
I'm having like a brain fuzz here. No, I think this is for the state. I don't think it's for the Congress. I'm just feeling all of a sudden I'm uncertain of myself. So I'm going to make sure I find out, because I'm just feeling like I don't know.
Well,
I've been saying that so often, I'm now feeling fuzzy. So I will find out.
Is split both in our US congressional district and divided between two state house districts. And so
Right. So I think it may apply to both, because I know we've been talking about both. And now I want to know what the regulation exactly says, because I'm just feeling fuzzy. So I'll get back to you.
Okay, and then two things regarding communities of interest. I know
Yes.
at our county level, this isn't a new it's not the 2020 redistricting, but it's maintained in the 2020 proposals. But like our Carson Newman College campus area does get split. Would you call that a community of interest?
Absolutely. That's a very good example.
Okay.
It
I mean,
was-
if you could even write that up and either send it to me or send it to Debbie Gold, I think that's a very good example.
It was actually very inconvenient when we were trying, I was like getting out the vote for a candidate that I approved of and hoped would win. And it was inconvenient because I didn't know which dorms in the university were off limits.
Yeah, there you
So-
go. And then it doesn't allow the people of that university to really have a representative who represents the full university. That's
Yeah,
exactly, it's perfect.
So our county commission is actually having their work session as we speak, and the redistricting committee is making a proposal. They're discussing tonight what then they'll vote on next Tuesday. So that
Was it open to the public?
the county commission meetings and committee meetings are always open to the public. I went to the redistricting committee meeting last week.
Good,
I'm
good. I
scared.
thought I read there was one, but I couldn't remember, so good.
Yeah. One other thing about communities of interest, because there is talk, we've heard that our county may end up moving into congressional district 1. We're currently split, a very small portion. As I said, we're split at that level too, but US Congressional District 1 takes a little piece of Jefferson County, and the rest of it is in District 2, which hangs with Knoxville. And I
And
think
that's what I'm in District 2, yeah.
yes. And there's talk that we may need to move, they may move our county into District 1. It would be nice to be only in one district, but our county really, we're an outskirt of Knoxville. You know what I mean? People in this county do things in Knoxville.
Right.
You know what I mean? We don't tend to drive to Johnson City, the other major.
Right,
area
understood.
to the east of us. So that's just another one that I was thinking, if we get moved into District 1 completely, I'd like to be in one district, but if we get moved into District 1 completely, I feel like we're kind of being cut off from
That makes sense.
the
Because that's
strength base of this
center.
district.
Yeah, because you're really more connected to Knoxville. We've had the same conversation, well, a similar one, I should say, with why is Oak Ridge not in the same congressional district with Knoxville? Because they share, there's a sort of even an innovation corridor with Knoxville and Oak Ridge. So that's a very good example as well, that you really belong to your work life and your is Knoxville centered, not District 1, which sounds more like it's going to be more rural.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions.
Does anybody else have a question? Okay, well, thank you very much. That was a very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Being with you. Take care, and I'll get you that information, Kat. I'll send it to you.
Okay, I'll send it around.
Thanks so much. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, Carolyn, sorry that you weren't able to see the presentation.
That's okay. I was taking notes. If she emailed it to you, if you
She
can,
did.
you can just send it to me and I'll look through it later.
Okay, I'll email it to you.
I did want to say one thing when, and I'm sorry, I have forgotten your name, who asked the questions. I know your face.
That was Laura.
Laura, you're talking about Carson Newman and the dormitories. And I wondered, Kat, you were trying to figure out who was where. Do you notice, do the students actually register to vote here, or do they maintain their voting at home? So I don't know how
No,
much.
some of them definitely do, because I had specific names of people I was looking for to ask to vote.
Oh, good. Okay.
I don't know how common it is among the students, because I also had a friend who went home to vote, basically, who
Yes.
was voting out of Nashville.
Right. And, of course, with COVID, we had a lot of issues with getting the college students counted. I work for census, and that's the part that I work on. So it's like,
I
that was
see.
a mess. So, yeah,
I imagine it was because for part of the COVID year, they were basically living at home and taking classes online.
right. And we came back to the schools and asked them to give us the numbers of their students who resided in the dorms, as much information they were allowed to get. We tried to recapture what would have been the case if they had been on campus as usual. So
I appreciate that you put that work in. I did not know that.
it was not pretty, but we did.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, yeah, I mean, COVID messed a lot of things up.
Mhm.
And I guess we'll be feeling the effects of that for a while, no matter what happens with the pandemic. But anyway, thank you for your observations.
No problem.
And I will see about mailing you that presentation.
Yeah, if you email it, I could just print it off here.
Okay,
Thanks.
take care.
Okay, and next month, Betty said, right, Charles is coming to talk about the county,
Yes.
same place, same time, not soon, right? He's coming.
Okay, hang on.
Then it said, too long, no, not too long at all.
The steakhouse split, that's new. But did you say we did it one on US?
Okay, and I need to get Carolyn's.
Yeah, you know.
I live District 2. Okay. We don't live very far.
Between your house and Dandridge itself. You live just outside of the city limit of.
Yeah, right outside, like half a mile outside. I was explaining to you, I think the
And
houses
I'll just do this.
that are on the Dandridge side of Plainview. I think they're in Dandridge, but our subdivision isn't, and we don't want to be, well, don't want to catch.
Oh, you're talking about the city limit now.
She's asking.
Yeah. I thought you were talking about 1 versus 2.
I just
Okay.
found out
I don't
your
know where
house.
the limit is for one. I don't know where it
You're
is.
in District 4?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're not into different things. I think. Freshman is.
One, is that the one you're talking about?
You're not.
No, I'm in county
She's
district.
she's
Yeah.
in county.
I'm Charles.
Actually, what I'm going to do is just unplug this.
I
You
got
know, it seems strange to me actually that we would be in with Knoxville. You can say, I mean, I went to Knoxville every day for 2 years, almost every single day for 2 years. But I don't go very much anymore, and I go to Northville. You know. In Jefferson City now.
Whereas I live in Knoxville.
Well, I do.
And I know, and Redwood, it really doesn't read. There's no way, yeah, so there's no way to kind of get
Right.
everybody to vote in a district where they're doing business and have.
Yeah.
people that they-
Yeah, you know, like not everybody in this town goes to Knoxville to work either, as far as I know.
People
If
from
they work
here-
here, they go to Morris.
Some of them commute to Morristown and some commute to Knoxville.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, I guess Heidi outside told her to start 10 minutes late because I didn't know that. And,
Communication.
well, I mean, Heidi never did communicate with me. I had to find out elsewhere where it was and get the link and everything.
Oh, okay.
So,
Kat, you did a nice job.
and Kat, Kat brought up to this.
Yeah.
You didn't know how to do it.
I'm sorry, don't say that.
No, I worked good. Thank you so much.
You are welcome.
Yeah.
I understand your brother passed away.
Now you know how.
We were, that was here, that, I mean, that was that day, definitely, yeah, went home, was.
You locked the door. Okay, I have to go to the restroom.
And he was like, I mean, he was right there. But then, with the critical hospital. Not supposed to do.
We see, let us say, come over, you know, and say, he looks very peaceful. But, yeah.
I was thinking about Chase afterwards, and I, what was next call, and I just made a decision to it, because I didn't hear till a few weeks later that had passed away, so. Sorry, and I do appreciate you being at our district, our redistricting meeting, or our whatever they're called, our, yeah, and I appreciate that, especially when it's like that.
It was something I wanted, especially since it's gonna be outside. I just wanted to do that.
Yes.
I had a lovely chat with him the night before. You're thinking for another minute for a story.
If cats are bad, I don't know.
Sure. Wednesday night before the meeting,
Yeah.
when that storm came through.
Right.
And at the, it was coming at us, and then it kind of the wind switched like at the last minute, it brought down a limb from an oak tree on the north side of 139, brought it down on the power line that goes to Bill's house. Snapped the line, snapped the power pole, pulled the electric fence right off that house. So he's on 10 meters back, like from oxygen generators if you don't have power. So we moved him when the golf cart over to the mom's house. Is that
Only that house got the pole, yeah, got it, still had power.
We had no power up and down the road for like 3 hours.
But got it
So
back.
the hospice people sent big oxygen tanks to mom's house so that we could get them on oxygen and keep them on it overnight. And then they got power back on like 3 hours to our house, mom's house.
But not to where,
But, you know, where the electric fence is not, so we have that.
Right.
And I was like, well, that's gonna take, well, they got an electrician the next day. Bill was cognizant enough to actually work the phone, and they got an electrician
He
there.
worked it.
He did, yeah,
He
yeah.
accomplished that on
Jeremy did.
Wednesday before he passed away on
Yeah,
Saturday.
yeah.
Wow.
This is Thursday, actually.
Yeah.
He'd been home on hospice for like 4 days.
Yeah.
And from the hospital, from the ICU. And Jeremy did what Jeremy does, which he, research things online, and got somebody to come from Blount County to come up and give us an estimate. These guys were really creepy. And they wanted money up front to go and buy materials. And that's like, there's no way. And by that time, the other electric company that they had worked with before that actually works in the county and knows Amber, American AC, knows who to call. They came and said, no, we can do it. We can do it right here.
We'll do it.
We'll do it. And they had the power back on like 6 o'clock at night.
On the Thursday.
On Thursday. But it was late in the day and they're going to call.
You did move it back to.
Right. So we didn't move back to Friday, partially because they got the electric on, but they didn't get the cable company. And it's like, well, these boys can't live without the
They need
cable.
some internet, yeah.
They need internet, or, they can't live. So they stayed one more night at mom's, and then they come back. We moved it back in the evening on Friday. And Jeremy had to make another trip to the pharmacy to get more drugs, like hospice nurse. So I had like 2 hours sitting with Bill, that we had with Butler.
That was, which day was that?
This was Friday night.
That was Friday night that you had that time.
You guys Saturday, but
Wow. And he wanted to be home.
he wanted to be home with his dog, with his cat, with his husband.
Yes.
And, he was willing to be in. He is stubborn enough that when he first came home and he rallied, he'd been home a week, the previous Friday.
Yeah. And had rallied and said, but I
had gotten.
I knew by Saturday you were saying that you could see that, it was now, but
That first Sunday, Monday, when he was home, it's like, he's stubborn enough, he's gonna take this thing.
yeah. Well, I'm glad you had a good time, and, you know, I had a
It
chance
was
to
a nice,
visit.
the nice, one that wasn't even that.
And he was where I wanted to be, and with we wanted to be with. And did, where he and his partner married, they got married when
They
they
got
got.
married.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. This was an unexpected, but a lot of times death is unexpected.
Right.
Yeah, you have to expect it to be unexpected. Okay, can I do anything to, you're plugging.
I just need to like put my stuff in.
I'll just wait for you. Okay. All right, bye, Carol. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah. It's always hard.
It is.
How did you, how were you connected? Oh, they give you a way to connect, or did you have to
No,
bring
I
up?
had to actually, they would have given me one, except they didn't have the kind I needed
Oh.
because all of theirs were USB. They didn't even have like USB. They expected you to have an HDMI port on your computer, which I do not have. But I went online and Googled and they made USB-C to HDMI cables. And I bought one from Amazon for like $9.
And that's how you
And
were
I brought it
connected?
in and tested it, and yes, it does work. That's how I was connected.
Were you connected back there or through here? No.
No, I was connected to the wall here.
Oh, I
The wall-
gotcha.
There's wires
I
that
see.
run.
This is the connection. You get your computer connected to that, but you have to have an HDMI, yeah.
Right.
Gotcha.
And basically, the sound is powered from there. I'm not sure if the projector is also powered from there,
Mhm,
but there is a remote in there you need to use to turn the projector on
mhm.
and tell it to accept input from
From this.
HDMI 2.
Well, the sound
In
was
order to
very
use the
good. I
HDMI.
mean.
Well, I had it turned up about as high as it
Yeah.
would go,
It
honestly.
was very good.
It was better than I feared it would be.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want me, does this go up and is it automatic? Is it a
No,
button?
leave it down,
Leave it down,
please.
okay.
That is, yes, it does go up, but if it goes all the way up, it hangs up.
So they
And
like
it's
to
hard
mess
to
with
get
it
it out
instead of
of it.
people.
Yes,
Okay.
it's hard to get it out again.
Yeah.
And it was stuck when I